a candidate is not able to clearly interpret entropy of this, but they do have content. They do have a lot of content to relate directly or indirectly. So there will be interpretation problem and you may end up writing something else relating to Max Weber rather than Karl Marx. Whatever a candidate is going to write, that will be more we can consider as, it will be more of imaginary, let's say this. So let's have public administration optional paper 1 analysis. In this analysis, we will tell you that what was the nature of questions, and at the same time we will try to also guess which questions students could have attempted. If you see first reaction or a quick reaction on the nature of questions, you can say. So this year paper can be considered relatively a bit different from last 3 years papers. So some questions were considered, some questions can be considered challenging, and we can consider that because of those questions, students may have faced challenges in terms of selecting which questions they should opt in that 3 questions that they have to select. Whether we should select 2 questions from section A and 1 question from section B, or we should select 1 question from section A and 2 questions from section B. So there may be a bit of challenge faced by the students in terms of that. So we will largely focus on that aspect. Detailed discussion of paper each question will be conducted a bit later, for which we will announce. So let's take that what we can consider about. If you take question 1, this question 1 can be considered largely doable question. This because if you take, let's say, question, it is related to imperfect market, the people will be able to write on public choice approach. It is related to rational decision making. The people with a bit of guessing, they would be able to write. This media, all similar question we ask already, let's say, they will also able to write. This question is a very simple question, and this question you can say this, you can consider public administration. So this can be also a doable question, you can say. In this means in all that, it can be a bit of challenging in terms of interpreting this 1B and exactly writing what it demands. Otherwise, all other questions, even Simon was quite predicted that Simon would be asked this year, and that is how one question, which is very simple, they have asked this. So in this question 1, we don't have to select, already it is selected. Now, if you take question 2, 3 and 4, so we will say that students may have attempted, or they should have attempted question 2 and question 3. From section, you can say section A, we will say you should have attempted question 2, question, let's say that 3rd, because we think that those questions are doable, better than even option 4, means 4th question, and other questions, you can say. Why? Let's take that. If you take questions, means this second A. The second A is about, let's say that new public management, new public governance. Last year also they had asked. So those who are prepared on new public governance, they know and they understand the relationship between new public management, and that is how they will be able to do this. Now, this is a very straightforward question. This weekend we say straightforward question. This is how people will be not finding it challenge. This question can find a bit challenging in interpretation, let's say, especially entropy that they have asked. That's also in context of closed model and open model. But it is related to public-private partnership, related to new public management. Even if a candidate is not able to clearly interpret entropy of this, but they do have content. They do have a lot of content to relate directly or indirectly, and that way, let's say that it should have been opted. Question 2. Now here entropy is related to, you know that it is disintegration, it is uncertainty, it is something loss. So there is also loss to closed system also, it has its own, they say, inherent problem. Even open model in PPP has also its own problems. If PPP has so many of conflicting interest, if there are so many stakeholders with conflicting interests, that also become difficult to manage, and that also result into project survival challenge, or you can say disintegration of the project, or let's say halt of the project, delay in the project. Basically, that is how it was, let's say, trying to ask this entropy, for which we'll talk in details later on. Now, question 3, if you see, so it is conflict situation. Basically, it is situational leadership linking. So, you have to link with situational leadership, and people are aware, Fred Fiedler model, task-oriented leader, extremely, let's say that, successful in, means task-oriented leader extremely task-oriented leader is successful in extremely favorable and unfavorable situation. So, this question is still, let's say that people would be able to link, and there is substance basically. There is substance in this because there is a theoretical backup. And similarly, it is new means this public governance means you can link with even new public governance, rule of law, this we can consider. So since already public governance you are writing, public governance here you are also writing, it is also a doable question, or you have content to write. Then let's say if you talk this C option, the C option also, let's say you have principle of checks balances, it is something GS type of question. Still you can have content. So that's why question 3. Why, let's say that fourth question you should not opt according to our, although this student seems to have attempted question 4. But from our perspective, let's say that why? Because of option 4C. If you take option 4C, so this option 4C is, you know that it is a Karl Marx question, and we don't think that students would be able to even interpret this question, relate with Karl Marx. Very rare. If someone knew it, then one can attempt. But since we considered very rare, there will be interpretation problem, and you may end up writing something else relating to Max Weber rather than Karl Marx. And it is because of this one question completely you are not aware, you may not write, and then there is no guarantee you will do justice, because again both questions are here. This is a simple question. But then will you able to relate and write 15-mark question, because generally a 10-mark question is asked. It is a very simple question, you can say that simple question. But if you take this delegated legislation, it is also doable question. It is also doable. But it is 20 marks. Again, is stretching. You are also stretching here, you can say that. You have to stretch to 20 marks level. Plus, it is a simple you will be doing, no doubt. But here, you may have challenge. If you compare question 4th, and if you compare question 3, they will give that you should have attempted given preference to question 3 rather than question 4. Because one question completely you may not be able to interpret, because bureaucracy constitutes imaginary state. Imaginary state is basically a rule-bound state, rule-bound bureaucracy, and spiritualism of the state is related to rational. Bureaucracy professes itself to be quite legal, rational, but in actual practice, it ends up alienating people. Spiritualism is highlighting the highest level of rationality of the state. That aspect. So whether students would be able to interpret in that way and they relate, if it is, then they should have attempted. Otherwise, we will say question 2, question 3. Why we will say this? Because we will always support that you should attempt 2 questions from section A, 1 question from section B, because section A is more theoretical than section B. Now, let's take that in this. So again question, if you talk, so 5th, it is e-advocacy model. There are various types of model, 5 different types of model, of which one can be considered. This, which last year they asked in GS paper, this year they have asked in public administration. Although people may have found a bit difficult, but they may have written on e-governance. Then new liberal policies enhance scope, let's say that can be, let's say, doable question. Policy analysis, it has been, let's say, regular that they have been asking on policy analysis. We also ask in our test. So that is also, let's say, people would be able to write values, ethics, etc. It is one question mandatorily they ask. That's also now in global context. The not challenging, economic development, this women empowerment. This again, it is a doable question. Largely people know that they may be able to write this. It was not challenging, option, let's say 5. So this year option means question 1, question 5. This is how even in paper second also they have kept it doable. But let's say question 6. So we'll say question 6 would be difficult to attempt. Why? Because they have asked industria, this we can say this. It's about industria interdependent. Industria interdependent economy, we know some aspects of agraria industria, but we don't know too much. Even if you know, it will be imaginary content. And that's also postmodern. That is how we were saying that the first time they have used the term postmodern in public administration. So those who had idea about postmodern, they would be able to link, but first that it is about less content on this, and then they are linking to postmodern. So whatever you are going to write, that would be new and imaginary, let's say, because you are not familiar with that kind of write-up. So this way you can consider role responsibility of state. It is a doable question, no doubt. But then affirmative action, that's also in global context. You can see this. They have asked. This is global context. Affirmative action. So affirmative action in global context, you know that it is challenging, because we may have less content on that. So 6th question, if you take option A, option C, the people may not attempt it. That is how it can happen. This, because less content, not difficult. But this, that we can consider. If you take this question, let's say 7. So in this, it is about LPG you can consider, and then it is limiting government function, reduce public expenditure. This way, however, both functions and expenditure, both function expenditure has increased. This account paradox. So basically you have to show two different things in this question. Shrinking but spreading on the one hand. This and spread is not necessarily bad, but some spreads can be considered bad. So this way, let's say you can see the paradox of this. And then it is challenging, because it is challenging question, not that easy question we can say. It depends how you feel comfortable, let's say that. This we can consider. So we are not suggesting to answer this. This, it is not because of A, but it is because of B question. In B question, they are saying, can we develop a contemporary theory of comparative public administration? Now, this kind of question we have not faced, let's say that, a contemporary theory of public administration. We generally talk about comparative public administration, contemporary status, but first time they have gone ahead and they are talking then whether is it feasible to have a contemporary theory of comparative public administration. So whatever a candidate is going to write, that will be more we can consider as, it will be more of imaginary, let's say this. This, that you can show some of, let's say that your probabilities, yes, this can be. Plus they have asked, let's say, comparative public institutional, and then they ask political economic. This. So when they ask institutional, political economic process approach, so that also becomes a bit challenging, what you are going to interpret. So option B can be also challenging question. And then competency mapping. So first, competency mapping, you can write something relevant to India. You can say that it can be related to competency mapping, domain competency of mission Karmi Yogi. But then do we have empirical link, let's say that this incentivizes civil servants and improve their commitment. So we may write it, but what we find is that we may not feel so comfortable in, let's say that, attempting this. That's why we, according to us, we would not attempt question 6, question 7. Now, question 8 we will support to attempt. Why? Because see, you have doable content on civil society. Already it was also asked in mock test. We had also practiced in sectional test. So you had already practiced and well tested question it is. So you will have contents and you can be confident also. Now, tacit knowledge, yes, here you may not be feeling, but if you apply a bit of mind, you can say tacit knowledge is related to extra rational factors of drawer you can consider. And because of that, let's say if you link extra rational factor, so there is a theoretical backup to answer this question. This, because we have rational factors, extra rational factors, and then there are certain things to write on them. And then let's say that this is again it is certain things you have, because it is a straightforward question on the syllabus topic. So you have again very certain things, objective things to write here, and you can be confident that yes, whatever you are writing, it is certified. Whatever you are writing, it is certified. Whatever you are writing, it is certified. So we can say that this question 8. So what we can consider as far as attempts are concerned, we can say that question 2 plus question 3 you can consider, section A and question 8. This is how should have been attempted. This. And that is what for paper 1 we can say this. So we'll bring similar analysis of paper 2. It does not matter, let's say if you have attempted different questions, again it is our understanding. You can have your own understanding, you can have your own comfort level, and you can have also a situational reaction to that. You can say that exam oriented environment. So it's not about which questions you have attempted, it's about how better you have written the answers that you write. And whenever you are writing the content in that answer, how certain, how appropriate, how authentic the content that you are writing is in the answer. So based on this, we can say you should learn, especially those who are preparing for 2026, those who are writing tests, various types of tests, etc., that selection of question is also very important. Which questions you select, the 3 questions, also determine a lot about the marks that UPSC is going to reward, because objective question, subjective question, doable question, and authentic content, certified content, already content we have available, another content that we go and try to generate ourselves, which may be established, which may not be established. Only let's say after that you will come to know. So these factors should be taken into consideration while attempting and selecting the questions. So here we'll finish and we'll take a detailed discussion of let's say paper, each question. Shortly we'll announce and we'll conduct discussion. All the best.